It's always great to be back on campus and have stimulating conversations. So always look forward to that opportunity. I think today it's a very interesting topic and a very relevant one that we're going to talk about on what's happening on the defense in the defense ecosystem and what that means for the startups. What I'll do before we dive into the topics per se, what I'm going to do is I'm going to request each of the panelists to maybe just very briefly while they were introduced, but maybe if they can just take a minute or so or 2 minutes to specifically talk about the technologies that they are working with, what is about the company in the companies that, which has been the core focus area, just so that the audience in the room is more aware of the specific technologies and areas that you're working on. That'll be super helpful. So maybe if you'll just go around.
I've been in space and defense for about 20 years now, 20 plus years. Worked with ISRO as one of my first clients and happened to have opportunity to work on payloads of Chandrayaan, payload of Mangalyaan, as well as several other critical payloads, which brought me into imaging technologies. And as optimized group, we've been working in the field of defense and space for both, front end, that is offensive technologies, as well as defense related activities for quite some time. We build ISR payloads, that is, we build satellites. We're building neuromorphic payload. We also make surveillance systems for border surveillance, coastal surveillance, and weapon sites, which are generally fusion sites with AI on board. Our customers are normally Army, Navy, Air Force, the tier ones like Bharat Electronics Limited, HAL, L&T, and ISRO, of course. Overall, we are a team of about 100 odd people here in Ahmedabad, around 70 plus people in Bangalore. And we've been funded by good venture capitalists who have backed us in the initial time since, from the seed stage, starting with GVFL, which is a Gujarat-based fund. Incidentally, by the way, I'm from Ahmedabad, so it was easy for me to, sort of immediately parachute over here, on request. But so we have GVFL, we have Bloom Ventures, we have Mela Ventures, and Equanimity. A bunch of people who have supported us in the history. We are winners of IDEX competition a few times. There are 30 crores grant from the government. So all in all, a lot of money invested into R&D. That's what we do. And yeah, I think we'll take it further from here. Thank you so much.
So we are DeepTerrain. I think we are the youngest of the startups here. So what we are doing is basically building this multimodal autonomous solution. Our idea is to cover both land, aerial, as well as static ground assets. So they are completely unmanned system. So they are the network of unmanned system. And the idea is to provide a comprehensive intelligence to the end user on which missions can be planned with both manned and unmanned assets. That's what we are doing actually. And we are located in Bangalore. We are a team of 20 people. So the vehicle out there is basically fully autonomous vehicle from DeepTerrain. Take a deep dive into it, ask them to show a short demo. You can see all the algorithms which are running inside, the computer vision side of it, how the autonomy is working. It will be good. That's it.
Hello. My name is Mohan Jindal. I was with Intel for a long time and left Intel, started Chipspirit in 2018. We are working with Indian Defense since 2018. We are the IDEX Disc 1 winner on the hardware security implementations, cyber security primarily. And we have filed about 14 patents today as on date, 5 granted in India and few in the US in the last stage of grant. So what we do is we work in terms of, for last 7 years, we have developed a lot of technologies with hardware only systems, like analog computers, mostly without any software. So there is no firmware, because for the security reasons, they don't want Windows operating systems for their encryption databases. So we're working with Indian Defense for last 7 years on these implementations. And also we are working with Navy very closely on one of the biggest orders of the IDEX. So those things we are doing, and we are bootstrapped. We have not raised funds till date, and we have been able to survive with, right now we have a team of nearly 100 people, all in Bangalore, doing a lot of deep tech work there in semiconductor based solutions. Thank you.
Hello everyone. First of all, thank you so much for having me here and giving me this opportunity to be present on this podium. My name is Ashutosh Baheti. I'm CEO of Paras Anti-Drone Technologies Private Limited. This is a subsidiary of Paras Defense. So in 2021, something struck me that, I'm making a lot of money by working with Google and bigger MNCs, but, what is the purpose? So the purpose is basically, it clicked me that, what we really need to do something for the country, and why not start something which is more soldier-centric. So when it comes to the soldier-centric, the asymmetric warfare, which we have recently seen in Operation Sindoor, it has emerged quite a lot, and we have been started working in 2021 itself on understanding what we can really build in terms of bringing RF and microwave systems, which can be utilized by a soldier, creating a complete situational awareness with multimodal sensor technologies in order to understand what is the threats, create a threat awareness around a soldier, creating a threat awareness around a unit, creating a threat awareness around air defense systems. This was the primary objective which we started with. We started building systems. We started building systems right from selection of the components to building subsystems to modules to building a system level which can be easily utilized or used by soldier and as well as used by their units. So we have been working in this domain for last several years, and we have really seen a tremendous growth in terms of how the technology is transforming and how the technology is coming into the play. Previously I have worked with, I was running my own companies, and as well as, I was working with, as a consultant working with Google, consultant working with Infineon Technologies to build the world's smallest radar sensor, which went into Google Pixel 4 phone, into Amazon devices, and several other for doing a kind of a proximity sensing. So this has been my, background, and I'm trying to utilize that in order to, bring up what we can build in terms of deep tech hardware for our country. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And let me actually just pick up from from where Ashutosh just briefly mentioned Operation Sindoor, right? Clearly, a landmark moment, and what you can see, at least from, and I'm seeing that, let's say, as an informed layman, one talked a lot about indigenous technologies being deployed. One before that thought that not a lot of those technologies were being developed in India, but clearly there was a lot of that being done, and a lot of that being done by what I would call, in the context of defense companies, young companies. My question to all of you is that, from your on the ground experience, is that really an inflection point for the Indian defense startup ecosystem to say that, hey, look, this is no longer just something on a drawing board, to actual out there, literally in the battlefield, but really more from an it's not just an intent. Is this something which is happening in the real, what is the change that you are seeing? Is this really an inflection point that we'll look back and say, hey, look, this is where the curve really changed for the defense startups in India? So I'd love to, maybe we can go around, and I would just love to get, everybody's thoughts and perspectives on that.
Maybe I can start with that. So I'm not sure about the others, but at least I can say that this was really an inflection point for me. So this really changed the overall dynamics, how you are building a company and how you are, penetrating into a customer. Usually, things before that was always like, every year you will see some tenders will come, you will participate in those tenders, and you will try to, penetrate the technology what you're building, especially when it comes to the counter drone technologies. But after Operation Sindoor, what we have seen is two dramatic changes. First, the customer is getting aware about the asymmetric warfare, because this is the first time in entire Asia where they have seen such kind of warfare, where they have started saying, oh, this is a completely something new. I don't know what exactly needs to be done. And there were cases which I have discussed even with customer, where there were more than 400 drones on their head and they don't know what exactly needs to be done. And it was also a good point, because we finalized our products last year, and that was exactly the point where we started even giving them in Operation Sindoor. And we told them, use it as much as you can into the forward regions and try to see basically how the product feedback is coming back in, maybe at even TRL 6, 7, you can give it to them and get a feedback, very good feedback. We had a very, very interesting feedback. We had a feedback where, even the soldiers are sitting in the forward areas, sitting in a bunker, and managed to basically do some things which, from the ConOps point of view, they managed to do it. So primarily it brings two important aspects which we see after Operation Sindoor. First, the customer is getting aware about they need more and more advanced technologies to be penetrated in their systems, the modernization aspects, the upgradation aspects into what is being existing as of today in terms of debts, in terms of assets and infrastructure. This is one. The second is it gives a so the companies which have recently participated into these EPRs, emergency procurements, you can see that many new companies are now coming and taking up the orders. Even the small companies are coming up, showing their capabilities and trying to get the orders, which itself is changing the overall scenario that it's not that the domain is closed basically for the small companies, but it's something if you prove with respect to the technology, if you prove the worth of the technology which you are bringing in, which can really help doing these operations, it is really acceptable basically to our armed forces. So it is primarily changing the ecosystem from two different perspectives. First is giving basically armed forces more and more awareness what they can really deploy into the field. This is one. The second is giving opportunities basically to small companies as well in order to participate in these kind of operations. Yeah.
So I would like to add there. I mean, some of the things that you could see physically, but in other things that you can't see. I mean, there were a lot of cyber warfare happening at that point of time. So there were a lot of attacks, both sides, okay, which were happening, and there were a lot of things going on. And in terms of orders, I believe it is the right point of time. One, I mean, I'm really very supportive of IDEX, a lot of grants. We are 2 times IDEX winners. He is an IDEX winner. And maybe there are other defense IDEX winners. I mean, through IDEX, only we got associated with IM Ahmedabad also. So Eric is sitting here. So in that manner, what I would like to add is the grants, which had happened like 6 years, 7 years ago, are also now coming to a point where the technologies are ready to be adapted at TRL 6, 7, and more mature, because the specification itself of what to be done is more important, because the things that in cyber warfare, like they don't know what it takes to get to level of memory attacks. I mean, we have to sit with them. It's not that they don't know, we also don't know. So we have to sit together, we have to specify what is required, what will solve our problem in our manner, in our way, where we have full control in terms of the encryption, in terms of the data flow, in terms of where our data is going, how we can protect it. So those were additional aspects that are being looked at. And in terms of inflection point, this is the right point of time, not only on the Operation Sindoor aspects, but the geopolitical situation, which is there is like 2-3 wars and on date ongoing. And in terms, I mean, we don't love wars, okay, I don't like it. But at the same time, it gives business to us, okay, where we have to defend ourselves in the rightful manner and protect our sovereignty. Because you can't give like 1 inch. If you give 1 inch, people will ask for more. Okay, so that way you have to put your step there.
You have to be ready for that.
You have to be ready for it. You need to define what are our priorities, and you can't let other, like Google, Microsoft, Intel, and all these companies are good, great. Okay, I was with Intel. Okay, so that way not an issue. But what I would like to say is, at the same time, they have more control on what you're carrying with you every day. So that way, the sovereignty aspect, as I think pointed in terms of technology, where we are and where we would be, there's a lot of hiring happening within the defense also, okay, in the defense, so that they can strengthen themselves in the technical aspects. And this is in a nice manner, I think. Of course, whatever happened, but we have to see how we can protect ourselves better in coming times. Thank you.
So I think Ashutosh mentioned subtly that 400 drones flying on your head. So just imagine the cognitive load that falls on the commanding officer there. So you basically have a radar in front of you and you're seeing there are 400 drones flying. So what needs to be done? So the need for a proper defense mechanism, a proper unmanned and autonomous mechanism which can actually integrate into the existing system. So, the idea is to reduce the cognitive load. Kya karna hai? So that solution is something which has to come autonomously. This is laid out procedure. So that's where I think it's definitely a big inflection point, if you're asking me. So what we thought we have, and we came to know what we need, what is the reality there. So the gap has been clearly understood, and that's definitely an inflection point. The need of the deep tech that is needed, and how quickly who can provide. So that's where the startup ecosystem comes into the picture. So definitely that's something which is created.
So I think the inflection point, in my opinion, is that of access to capital. All the scientists and engineers can do nothing if they are not given the liberty to spend capital towards innovation. And so far, for years together, I was always told by all the investors, please write down on a piece of paper, in blood, that you will not produce a equipment that can harm human lives. And we've always been on the peacekeeping side of it. So we make cameras that can be installed at border that can check on militants coming towards you. But we don't do anything to the militant, God forbid, let him come. So we can only let the people know that some militant is coming, where he's coming from, whether he's carrying a rifle or not, etc., etc. But that's the information that the device can give you. Suddenly, after Operation Sindoor, I got tons of phone calls in the next 7 odd days from all the investors that I had spoken to in the past, asking me whether your systems were used in any offensive, whether you produced any ammunition, whether you produced any consumable that could have been used, which can now be multiple times used again and again. And I asked all of them, didn't you all want me not to ever harm a human being? What happened to that ethics and morals and the long-standing ideas of humanity that you had in your head? Turns out that ethics exist, but now nationality and sovereignty has taken a little high priority. Second thing which has happened is, so far all the money was coming from outside of India, so the LPs were always controlling what the local funds would do. Suddenly, all the Indian family offices have grown into understanding that Indian defense needs to be strengthened. And these family offices have put together funds which is huge. And that access to capital will, for the first time in my opinion, give us the chance to actually create something which is innovative, because if your funding agency or if your investor is stopping you or blocking you from innovation, then what good is the innovation you are going to make anyway?
I think it's actually very insightful. I know all of you have talked about one or two specific things, and I'm going to pick dive into them. Each one. I know you talked about the role of capital. You talked about cybersecurity. You talked about different autonomous. How would those things work? And you've also, I think, briefly just hinted at some of the supply chain issues part of it. So I'll what I'm going to do next is to just dive into each one of these topics a little bit. So actually, let me start with you, Amit. I don't know how many of you had a chance as you were coming in to see the DeepTerrain vehicle which was out there in the whole autonomous unmanned systems that they've put together. I think, Amit, if you can briefly talk about two things. Clearly, it's no longer a single technology, right? Even when you talked about the cognitive load, I mean, what to do with it, how to deal with it, it's not a single technology. So talk about from a technology perspective, how do you manage those kind of aspects? And second, and in some ways, that cuts across almost all defense, startups is, how do you know it's battle ready? How do you know it's actually can be used, can be deployed? Because, if it's happening in real time at that time, it needs to work. Because otherwise, after that, unlike in a lot of other situations, you can come back and say, hey, this didn't work. Okay, now I know, I'll come back and correct it and then make it work. But, it's almost like there is no second chance for that. So what do you have to do to make sure that it works in those, how do you deal with that aspect? If you can touch upon that, Amit.
Yeah. So I think there are two sides of the question. So that is, so when you talk about autonomy, right? So there are so many sensors, multimodal version of sensors which are playing in the play there. And the question is, what used to happen earlier, and now when you're talking about technology, integrating this into the real warfare scenarios, what has evolved? So one of the biggest thing what I see is basically the ability of computation. So the edge computing. So earlier, what used to happen? So you get the information is downloaded from the sensor to your data centers, to your computes, and then you try to compute and figure out what is actually happening. Now the question is, you don't have the time. So everything is right in the real time. The drone is coming up there. You need to take an action right there. So the evolution of the edge computing world, that's one of the biggest thing. So you have an electro-optical which you have placed there. So earlier you had somebody sitting there watching and, oh, there is somebody intruding. I need to do something. So that part is basically removed. Now the question is, you have the computation ability that has evolved, the overall computation side of it, wherein the decisions, your neural networks, your AI algorithms are able to take the decisions right on the edge side of it. So that's one of the biggest thing that has evolved. So which made this, the real scenarios handling possible. And coming to the testing side of it, right? So one of the biggest validating what you're doing. So one of the biggest thing is the simulation side of it. So what we do is we generally create a lot of simulation. The basis for this is basically the whole simulation world. So the kind of detections, what your algorithms are doing, so exactly simulating the border scenarios. So there are 2 persons intruding, there are 10 persons intruding, there's a daytime intrusion, there's a nighttime. So you try to simulate all of these scenarios there, and then you subject your algorithms, systems to rigorous testing over it. So that's where the intelligence gets validated on the first hand, and then you take it on to the deployment, just first validation, and then slowly move to the deployment side of it. So it's a process which goes one by one. But data is the biggest play over there. So you collect data, gather the data from the border side of it, put it into a simulation world, run it through multiple times, and then you say, okay, I think it's working. So that is the first step, and then you go for the slowly stepwise deployment on that side.
I don't know if any one of you want to add on that, especially on the deployment side. That would be super helpful.
So everybody says defense cycle is a bit slow in terms of orders. So that is because of these testings. So a lot of testings that happen, and TRL 8 and all also. And of course, there are other procedures as well in terms of, the benchmarking checks and other validation on the order piece of it, depending on the amount of the order. But in terms of technical, we are in good hands. There are a lot of excellent technical guys in defense that we work with, and we integrate all the things with them at their premises in their own manners. And then there are a lot of certification agencies which it goes through before it is said mission ready. Okay, so there are a lot of checks and balances in place before saying that it is done. Of course, simulation, as Amit pointed, other things that we do in-house in our labs to just prove everything, that is that. But in terms of acceptance of the defense, there are a lot of checks and balances that happen before it is being even at the stage of RFP. Yeah. So.
And additionally, especially the processes which has been evolving on the customer side as well. So initially they were just putting on GEM and they were saying, okay, whoever is L1, they will buy it. But now the processes is changing in terms of they are doing technical evaluations. So first you bid it, then of course they will do a technical evaluation. Though there are also lot of things which needs a modification there as well. But at least now they are doing or technically evaluating the products in order to see what products fits well with respect to their requirements. So that way it is changing a bit, but of course it needs a lot of changes as well, which will come across. Yeah.
Mohan, let me pick up on what you mentioned. You said there was a visible part. And then there is a part which we don't see, but if something happens, we all feel it, which is the whole cybersecurity aspect about it. And there clearly semiconductors play, what you're doing over there is a very important aspect. Yeah. That is also the fact where, if you look at today in terms of our own supply chains and all of that, there is obviously a lot of push. Yep. But as of now, that's something that we lag behind, right? Yeah, if you look at, you obviously worked for Intel. I had a small stint at Intel as well. So in that aspect, how do you work through the whole cybersecurity issues, especially, from your vantage point on the semiconductor side, if you can touch upon that?
Yeah. So I think that very well pointed out. Logical part of it. If this light goes or this mic doesn't work, we'll be here. Okay, still here. But the main aspect is the logical aspect, okay? Like supplying all the data points, all the data that goes into your edge or the central computing. And in terms of the cybersecurity, it's very important. There's no doubt about it, no doubt about. But and in supply chain also. So in terms of the semiconductor, I mean, I'll touch about a little bit on the technical aspect also. So like we see the application layer, right? The application layer and the other layers, so many layers are there. And in the, if something is happening in the basement, we don't even know. So that is where the hardware security comes in picture. So if there is something at the semiconductor level, let's say if you put a halt instruction into a CPU and somebody takes out your code, it can open your phone without you. And software will never know what happened also. So those type of things are things that are very important and are being acknowledged. That's why there is a lot of push on semiconductors, having the fabs here, because in the supply chain, we have seen the Israeli pager bombs, okay? Those were the visible things. And there are like the Venezuela thing happened just now, visibly, okay? Where the technology aspect is very important in terms of controlling what is happening, but you are not there, okay? So stopping that is our defense here, in terms of stopping somebody getting into our systems without our acknowledgement. So those type of things are happening, and happening in the sense, I mean, we are far, we are not there. There's a lot of gap, there's a lot of opportunity. Okay, so that is, I see it as opportunity for all of us here. As, I mean, there is a lot of opportunity in terms of semiconductor. There are a few fabs being set up at 28 nanometer. Okay, but we are still, I will say, 20 years behind in terms of fabs. Okay, in terms of the hardware part of it, but we can leapfrog. So there are investments happening. There are a lot of push happening from the government, non-government things, and we have to develop. We have to develop some things from the scratch, because those are technologies which are even controlled will not have an access also. Even if we will pay the dollar, we may not get the equipments also. So those are things which are happening today, and I think there's some. It's not. It will take about maybe, I don't know, a decade or so before we get the hardware also us on our own, the semiconductor chips that we need. But I don't know by then where the others will go. So we have to move fast. We have to act fast. A lot of quick decisions are very important in terms of government as well. So it's not just that we talk. Okay, it is like, but that's happening. I believe so. With you see startup sitting here. I have never, I mean, one of the Navy officer, okay, he told what happened, what is this, and all. I told we two are sitting together on the same table, that's a good thing. Okay, so a lot of things happening positively, but you have to act fast. The policy side of it, venture capital side of it, execution side of it, I mean, everything we need yesterday actually. Okay, so a lot of things in terms of hardware, in terms of software, firmware, being developed, to be developed, yeah. We're working. Yeah.
Clearly, that's, I mean, the cyber warfare is going to be, is clearly something that we see, whether we don't visibly see it, but the effects are visible to all of us. So clearly, that's an area that we need to have a sharp focus on. Ashutosh, let me ask you, in most industries, we talk of integrated supply chains. Right? If you look at a particular subsystem or a system being developed, you'll have components being developed all over the world. You're doing some, additions on top of that, and then, maybe that's a subsystem which is then being, used somewhere else. Almost by definition, it seems like on the defense side, it's almost impossible, right? You would not take a China component. I mean, if you look at most systems, you will say, oh, this, if you go down the supply chain, you will come back and say, oh, this API, I'm saying in the pharmaceutical was from China, or in a lot of other things, you will say this came from China. Clearly, there are restrictions from US. I mean, historically, one can go into the long history of US, India, and all of those, and from other parts. So given that is the scenario, how do you deal with the supply chain issues, in the defense ecosystem?
It's a very interesting topic. So I'll give you one explanation of the subsystem we develop. So far we have been using one of the US company parts in one of the modules which we develop. Now, because of the geopolitical drama which is happening right now and the tariffs being put on, it is almost becoming impossible to get those parts, even if you want to get it for, let's say, even if you place an order, they will call you basically in few days saying that I'm going to give you in 6 months. Now, in 6 months, I cannot deliver basically a product to a customer. And you have only, when you get something in EPR, like emergency procurements, you have to deliver things basically exactly in 6 months or, below than that. Otherwise, the orders are going to be cancelled. So it's something which has been seen, but the pull from the semiconductor always comes from the fact that there is a some module vendor who is really making a module by taking a chipset and building it. So far, Indian defense industry was always been, buying the subsystems from here and there, integrating it, and we were one of the very good integrators into the country. We are the good SIs who is building basically systems and delivering it to a customer. But now when you really need to build those parts, you need to bring the entire semiconductor ecosystem also along with you. So what we did in one of our projects is we basically worked with one of the Indian semiconductor firms. We gave them our requirements. We told them that if you need to apply for the DLIs and PLIs, please go ahead. We will support you. We will also give you all the letters that we are going to procure it. In case if some investment also needs to be done, we will do those investments. This is how we get the indigenous power amplifier done into the country. You can use the fabs outside, doesn't matter. But until unless the design is being done in the country and you are giving me a packaging where, the Indian semiconductor firm name is written on it, this is good enough for me to start with the supply chain aspects. And when you really go down to that level and start building a module, once you have that module, then you can go up and start building a product. That's the only way. That is one of the very, very hard ways to do it. But that is the only way in order to basically enable the entire semiconductor ecosystem along with you as a subsystem module developer and a system integrator, or let's say going forward as a system integrator in order to build a product or a reliable product basically for your defense forces. So that needs to be done. If let's say, 10 big companies in the country, MNCs come all together and say, okay, I make a consortium with 1-2 semiconductor players, 1-2 subsystem developers. This is how you build a product. That's exactly how DARPA and how SBIR programs in US also has been, grooming up basically for last several decades. That's the only thing which we need to integrate in our systems to understand and create an approach of creating consortiums. हमारा प्रॉब्लम क्या है कि हम धीरे धीरे ये सोचने लग जाते हैं कि नहीं ये भी मैं कर सकता हूँ, ये भी मैं कर सकता हूँ, ये भी मैं कर सकता हूँ. Then ultimately we'll end up in a trouble because we don't have a system basically which we can deliver, or an efficient system which we can go and deliver basically to a customer. So consortium is the only approach, but building the consortiums right way is the approach where you can handhold each other in order to build a sustainable, scalable, dual use technology so that you can also survive in the market, because you cannot just depend on the Indian defense business in order to let you survive in the business, right? You have to build the technology, the semiconductor in such a way that it can be utilized in dual use technology so that it will become easy for you, whatever you are developing or whatever the subsystem module guy is developing, whatever you are developing as a complete system vendor goes into the other areas also. That's how the semiconductor will survive. Because if you don't have volume, semiconductor cannot survive. Semiconductor need volume to survive. So yeah, that's my point of view.
No, I think that's actually a very and let me actually pick on that part of what you said, dual use, and actually come to you, Sandeep, and link it to something that you had said in the start about investors and how they had thought about that. So let me and maybe a slightly is defense, especially, and I'm talking just from a capital perspective lens, is defense a good enough market from an investor perspective, or are they necessarily saying dual use also? Do you need that? Is that it's a slightly I'm just curious to get your thoughts, because you did talk about the investor mindset on that.
Right. Yeah, I think investors, you don't necessarily see too many long-term investors. They have a horizon because they have capital only to offer to you, and obviously they would want capital to give them the maximum returns. So they would therefore definitely want to ride the cycle with you or ride a wave with you for a particular period of time. So when it comes to defense as a business, it's pretty long gestation. It takes like years together to come through with a trial. There are trials of products that are going on currently, where the project was given a AON, that is acceptance of necessity, in 2011. We are here in 2026 and the trials are going on. So it's not, therefore, one of the most investor friendly. Yes, currently it's the flavor of the season, right? So that's I think, probably an anomaly in general in terms of what's going on. But defense alone would only work for you if you have something which is more consumable than purely technology, but technology-based equipment. The good part about India, however, is we are so far behind in our technology and in terms of our own sovereign capability that there's so much gap available for you to travel that we are not going to be dead for a very long time. The acceleration that we see today, or the momentum that we see today, has at least about a decade or a little more than that, of a similar level of velocity that I see. There is so he mentioned about 20 years behind, in terms of some of the technologies out there. Lots of defense technologies that we currently don't have are already done and dusted in Israel, France, and US. And they're at least about 5 decades old, 4 to 5 decades old. So we need to still catch up with that. Obviously, we will probably take a leap and we will go beyond that without even going through that path. But there's enough and more available. But, I'll probably just take one twist onto this one. See, just because we have capital does not mean that we are capable. Our issue is talent. We were never looking at defense seriously since independence. And suddenly one fine day we are saying, hey, ye lo 100 crore rupees, can you develop something? It doesn't work that way. We need to go to the same churn that all of the big daddies have done, and we need to have that level of cultural building also happening into our institutions. The academic institutions need to get sensitized about what is the requirement of defense and also work towards it. For almost about a generation, about 25 years, we created only software engineers. They would be civil engineers or they would be mechanical, plastic, rubber, whatnot. But eventually they would end up doing only coding. So, we've just killed the entire talent pool. Now is a good time. In the last 5 years, thanks to IDEX and all, the government has put in extreme amount of impetus and so much talent has come back into the system. I'm sure that I think is going to be more revolutionary, and then defense alone probably might be a good idea. But as far as right now is concerned, I would say that defense alone means you are in it for at least 10 years. So if you are a smart entrepreneur, the guy who rides the tide for a while and then as soon as the tide goes low, he switches to the other tide, then defense probably is not the way to go. You need badass people here who just don't give up.
I'll just add to that. In terms of defense alone, there is not only Indian defense, okay? So you can go out, there are a lot of countries who follow India also. And the systems that we develop, at least the system that we developed at Chipspirit is like world-class system. First time in the world that is happening with only hardware, all the encryption, everything's being done. So those type of things, if we as integration, we are doing excellent integrations. Of course, the semiconductor chips, as I said, will take some time to be there. But we can design here, we can fab it out from anywhere. At least we have the control. It's not that we are having, if there is one neighbor or other neighbor, or there is Europe, we go to other places, Korea, we can fab it out from other places, okay? And not US if they don't allow, okay? And so the thing is the control. Okay, so we have to have the control at integration level, and that needs a lot of specifications also. We don't even know what to do. So those type of things, detailing down the data sheet of what we need and adding the volumes and dual use. I think there are a lot of opportunities here in terms of defense itself also is a good market, by the way. Indian defense, there are 3 services within, and there are so many paramilitary services. Then there are so many of the other, Asian countries are there and some other countries. So it's like so many countries where you can still go. It's not, defense is also good enough, but yeah, you have to see what dual use you can prepare, yeah.
A Cold War like that. After that Cold War, there is like a peace collaboration, Washington Accord like that and all, okay? And it is like a terrorist sindoor and I can just go and, kill so many people. I have the power. But peace through peaceful patience, truce through display of strength, that is America never worked. Even a simple Afghanistan, they have to withdraw, right? So this is fine, But for me, I'm like a extension of Washington Accord. But Pakistan is a partner in Washington Accord. Let me address the root cause of the poverty there, right? That helps me resolve the, like a peaceful collaboration. Suddenly, I experience I'm from Texas A&M. U.S. Air Force has like a integration definition standards. This is like a this and also the peace through this integration definition standards. That's an agile system. Otherwise, what happens? Just as the Cold War, like America Russia rigged. Now we have a multi-axis, where India is also, traditionally we were like non-aligned, we had so much sacrifice
Sir,
for peace.
could I ask you to be crisp with your question? Is there a specific question that you're trying?
Okay, so either if you are talking about sovereignty, take the challenge of integration definition standard, how the Cold War, diplomacy, how they subsided that, bring that also into the equation, right? It is systems, subsystems, without that a missile won't hit. The same systems,
I'll
subsystems,
take that. I'll
per
take
capita
that.
income
So,
also
sir,
I can design.
the thing is like, thank you for the question. So the thing is like, Abu Dhabi and Dubai also used to fight, but they make a UAE later on. So if Pakistan, India can do that, we are in for it. Yeah.
Sir, this is Abdesh. Just had a question for all the panelists. Other than the long gestation period which you talked about, any defense project, like Sandeep rightly brought out, a project for which the AON was accorded in 2011, the trials are still on. What are the other challenges as a startup which you find? Because I have handled capital procurement at Vayu Bhavan for the last 7 years, so I'm fully aware of it. But as a startup, what are the challenges which you list out?
The first and foremost challenge as a startup is that you don't get access to the actual user requirement. Unfortunately, by way of its character, defense is insulated. So you don't get access to the person who is going to use your product on day one. What you can only do is you can reach out to the person either through some expo, like a defense expo or an Aero India. You can go out through some command. Whatever you do, the innovation that you wish to bring upfront is not given feedback about that, okay, this is what you're where you're going wrong, probably can you do this? We have to participate in an NCNC or through field trials and take our journey of around 6 months to 9 months minimum to just find out or get the feedback of the user. This particular process is so tiring that any innovation is then curtailed, because after 3 or 4 iterations, after 4 years, a startup will think, well, if these people are satisfied with exactly what they have, they want to make the QR exactly what they have seen, why on earth am I wasting my time and energy in building something extraordinary for them? Because they are not participating in the process. Apart from IDEX, where again, I would say that it's a significant leap, but apart from IDEX, you can't make any other innovation because you don't get access to the user's feedback. I think that's the biggest one.
Yeah, I think technology, when you talk about importing semiconductors, so when the systems get more complex, you need higher compute. So you're talking about 5 nanometer, 2 nanometer technology, edge computing devices, the geopolitical challenges, supply chain, they completely cripple your systems actually. You're always in the waiting mode to integrate the chipsets into it.
In terms of orders you mentioned, right? So there are a lot of steps, about 25 steps to get to one is the user, and then there are a lot of internal feedbacks which happen at different stages of the TRL levels also. So once it is ready, then some things will change in terms of details of the data sheet that you have produced. So fixing on that, and then the people also change. The seat is the same, but there are those challenges. A lot of challenges are there. We can talk after the meeting, okay, after this call. There is no one that we can say. But main thing is getting orders, getting revenue for a startup is the biggest thing that can solve a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah, as he stated, there are several challenges. When you sit on that seat, then you can really realize this is one of the most difficult business which you are, entering into. You need to be patient, resilience, and keep on, doing what you are doing for several years in order to get the reward out of it. Maybe the reward is not going to be like, you have built an AI overnight and, next day you are selling it. But the reward is the fulfillment when your systems are being used at the places which is really making your soldier feel secure and to being utilized. So that's the most rewarding thing which you can do for the country. Yeah.